You need to watch this if you crave chills down your spine. Welcome to Soul Studios. Here, true crime meets the unknown. Suspense lurks in every shadow and supernatural forces whisper from the dark. We craft chilling, edge-of-your-seat short stories inspired by the eerie, the unexplained, and the most haunting mysteries. 3 new stories drop every week, each one darker than the last. Are you ready to step inside? Subscribe now before the next story finds you.
After moving into a new apartment, 11-year-old Michael begins seeing terrifying visions of a ghostly woman hanging in his closet. As the line between nightmare and reality blurs, Michael's family must confront the apartment's dark history and their own growing fear. This intense, realistic horror story unravels a chilling mystery rooted in sorrow, grief, and the haunting weight of the past. With every creaking door and sleepless night, Michael inches closer to a truth more terrifying than he ever imagined. Because sometimes, the scariest ghosts aren't the ones you see, they're the ones you feel. If you love gripping psychological horror, realistic scares, and emotionally powerful storytelling, hit subscribe now and join us for more haunting tales every week. Don't forget to like, share, and hit the bell, if you dare. Michael pressed his face against the car window as they pulled up to the new apartment building. It was a squat brick structure, 3 stories high, with narrow windows that reminded him of eyes squinting in the late afternoon light. The sky hung low and grey, threatening drizzle. As the car rolled to a stop, he could see a faded sign by the front entrance, Maple Terrace, its painted letters peeling. This was home now, whether he liked it or not. Stepping out of the car, Michael inhaled deeply. The air smelled different here, a mix of damp concrete, cooking spices drifting from a window above, and the faint tang of autumn leaves decaying on the sidewalk. It wasn't an entirely unpleasant smell, but it wasn't home. Not like the pine scent that always hung around their old house in the country. He shivered and pulled his jacket tighter against the chill. His mother, Rachel, opened the trunk to unload a box of kitchen utensils. She gave Michael a quick, reassuring smile that didn't reach her eyes. Michael knew she was trying to be upbeat for his sake, but he sensed the tension in her tight shoulders. "Grab something to bring inside, honey," she said gently. Her voice was warm but edged with tiredness. Michael nodded and hefted a box with Michael's room scrawled on it in black marker. The cardboard edges bit into his palms as he followed his parents up the cracked concrete steps to the front door. His father, David, juggled 2 suitcases and a duffel bag, grumbling under his breath as a metal tool inside clanked. Inside the foyer, the building smelled of old carpet and bleach. The hallway light gave off a dull yellow glow, flickering slightly. Their new apartment was 2B, on the 2nd floor. As they climbed the narrow staircase, each step creaked, the sound bouncing off the chipped paint of the stairwell. Michael's heart thumped with a mix of nerves and curiosity. Moving had meant leaving behind his school, his friends, everything familiar. Now here they were, about to see what home would be. Rachel fitted a brass key into the lock. With a firm twist, the door to 2B opened. Michael peeked in from behind his parents. The living room lay directly ahead, an empty space with threadbare brown carpet and a single window facing the street. To the right, a short hallway led deeper inside. The walls were off-white with scuff marks near the baseboards. A faint smell of fresh paint tried to mask something stale underneath. "Home sweet home," David muttered, attempting a jovial tone that fell flat. He set down the luggage in the living room with a thud. Rachel shot him a glance, part encouraging, part anxious, then carried her box toward the kitchen nook to the left. Michael hovered in the doorway until his mother gently nudged him inside. "Come on in, Michael. Let's see your room," she said, forcing cheerfulness. He followed her down the short hallway, past a tiny bathroom on the left. On the right was a door slightly ajar. His mother pushed it open. "This is your room," she announced softly. Michael stepped in. The room was modest, maybe 10 by 12 feet. The walls were the same off-white, one sporting a solitary nail where a picture might have hung. At the far end stood a small closet with twin folding doors, painted white. The left door didn't shut fully. It hung a crack ajar, showing a sliver of darkness inside. He felt an odd flutter in his stomach at the sight of that narrow gap, a mix of curiosity and unease. Back in their old house, his closet had been just an open alcove. Here, he could shut the closet away, or someone could shut themselves in, he thought before he could stop himself. Rachel set a box down by the wall. "We'll arrange your furniture once the movers arrive tomorrow with the big stuff," she said. "For tonight, you'll use your sleeping bag, okay?" She brushed a hand through Michael's dark hair. Michael nodded. "Okay." His voice came out small. He realized he was clutching the box to his chest and set it on the floor. David appeared in the doorway, wiping sweat off his brow. "Not too bad, huh, champ?" he said. "It's smaller than your old room, but we'll make it nice. Paint it any color you want." He stepped in and opened the closet door wider. It creaked in protest. Decent closet space. The closet smelled musty, like old wood, and a whiff of something sweet, like flowers long dried. Maybe the previous tenant stored potpourri or perfume in there. The closet was empty except for a wooden rod across the top and a single wire hanger left behind, dangling slightly bent. Inside walls carried yellowish water stains near the ceiling, perhaps an old leak. David frowned. "I'll mention that to the landlord," he said to himself, Michael's eyes fixed on the solitary hanger. As the door moved, the hanger swayed, its shadow shifting against the wall. For an instant, the shadow looked like a hanging figure. Michael blinked hard. It was just a bent hanger's shadow, nothing more. He felt a small cold bead of sweat trickle down his neck. "It's fine," he mumbled, stepping back. He suddenly wanted the closet closed. David gave the hanger a final curious glance and then shut the doors. The left door popped back open a half-inch once he let go. David closed it again firmly until it clicked. "Just needs to catch," he said with a shrug. He put a hand on Michael's shoulder. "We'll get your stuff in here soon. It'll feel like your space in no time." They returned to the living room, which was slowly filling with boxes and suitcases. Over the next hour, they unpacked essentials. Michael helped line the kitchen shelves with paper while his mother unpacked dishes. His father fiddled with a living room window that wouldn't open fully. The familiarity of these chores was comforting. It made the strange apartment feel a little more normal, at least for now. By dusk, the rooms grew dim. Without lamps yet unpacked, they relied on the harsh overhead lights in each room. In Michael's bedroom, the single bulb cast stark shapes on the walls. Every time he passed by his room, he found himself glancing at the closet. The doors were shut. He told himself he was glad. Around 7, Rachel decided it was time to find dinner. "How about we walk down the street and see what we can get? I think I spotted a pizzeria nearby," she said. Michael felt relief at leaving the apartment for a bit. The three of them put on jackets and stepped out. The street was lit by a few streetlights. A breeze had picked up, rustling dried leaves along the curb. They found the pizzeria 2 blocks away, a tiny place with fogged-up windows and a warm, yeasty smell that made Michael's stomach rumble. Over slices of hot pizza, they ate quietly at first. The move had taken a toll on all of them. Michael watched his parents under the pizzeria's harsh fluorescent lights. His mom's face looked drawn, and his dad chewed slowly, lost in thought. After a while, David cleared his throat and tried to lighten the mood. "Bet you'll make a bunch of new friends at school next week, sport," he said. Michael shrugged. "Maybe," he said softly. The idea of being the new kid made him anxious, but he didn't want to add to his parents' worries by saying so. Rachel reached over to squeeze Michael's hand. "We know it's hard. We're proud of you," she said. "And hey, maybe this neighborhood will have some cool places to explore. We'll check out the park this weekend." Michael mustered a small smile. Sure. He appreciated her efforts, even if he wasn't convinced. The walk back felt even colder. Night had fully fallen, and the few shops that were open cast rectangles of light onto the sidewalk. An old barber shop on the corner was dark and shuttered. Across from their building, the convenience store's neon sign buzzed. Michael walked close to his mom, listening to the lonely sounds of distant traffic and the wind rattling a loose street sign. Inside the apartment building's foyer, the air was warmer and smelled of someone's cooking. They climbed the stairs to 2B. Michael's legs felt heavy now, the day's weariness catching up to him. His mother told him to wash up and change into pajamas while she found the bedding box. In the cramped bathroom, Michael flicked on the light and squinted at the harsh reflection of himself in the medicine cabinet mirror. He looked pale and tired. "New adventures," he whispered, trying to sound positive. It didn't really work. After brushing his teeth, he found his room ready with his sleeping bag laid out and a pillow at one end. His mother had plugged in a small nightlight in the corner outlet, a soft orange glow that pushed back some of the darkness. He hadn't needed a nightlight in a long time, but tonight he was glad for it. "Think you'll be okay tonight?" Rachel asked gently as he changed into flannel pajamas. He nodded. "Yeah, it's just one night without my bed." She smiled and motioned for him to get into the sleeping bag. Michael crawled in, and she tucked the edges around his shoulders, an old habit from when he was smaller. She then bent to kiss his forehead. Her hair fell around his face, smelling of her familiar jasmine shampoo. For a moment, he felt a surge of homesickness for their old house, but he swallowed it down. "I know this is a big change," she whispered, "but we have each other. That's what matters, right?" "Right," he agreed in a whisper. His throat felt tight. "Love you, Mom." "I love you too, sweetheart." She stroked his hair, then stood. "We'll be in the living room if you need us. Your dad's going to unpack a few more things. Try to get some sleep." "Okay." She turned off the overhead light, leaving just the nightlight's dim glow. At the door, she paused and gave him an encouraging smile, then pulled it halfway closed so the hall light wouldn't bother him. Michael lay on his back, staring at the ceiling where striped shadows from the blinds crisscrossed the darkness. The unfamiliar room felt strange around him, new drywall smell mixed with the faint mustiness of old carpet. He turned his head toward the closet. It was just a darker shape in the corner. The doors were shut, just as he had left them. That gave him a small comfort. From the living room, he heard the low murmur of his parents talking, their voices a muffled lullaby of ordinary life. Wrapping himself tighter in the sleeping bag, Michael closed his eyes. Gradually his breathing slowed as exhaustion overtook anxiety. A creak. Michael's eyes snapped open. He held his breath and listened. Another soft creak, like a wooden floor shifting or a door easing open. Was that in his room or just the building? His heart thudded against his ribs as he glanced at the bedroom door. It was still half open, and beyond it he saw the hazy light of the living room. No shadows moved there. His parents were quiet now. He could hear the faint clink of a glass, maybe Dad getting water. Then he heard a sound that set every hair on his body upright. The soft tick of the closet's folding door hinges, faint but distinct. He turned his head slowly toward the closet. In the weak orange glow of the nightlight, he could just make out the outline of the closet doors. The left door was open a crack. I closed that, Michael's mind raced. He remembered clearly pushing it shut after his dad had left the room. It had latched. He was sure of it. Now it was open about 2 inches. Michael's mouth went dry. He sat up slowly, the sleeping bag falling away from him. The fabric made a whispering sound and he froze, ears straining. For a long moment, he stared at the sliver of darkness between the door and the frame. Nothing moved. All was silent. He thought of calling out to his parents, but what could he say? The closet door opened by itself? He had already complained about the closet once. He didn't want to seem like a baby. Dad would just tell him it doesn't latch well, or that maybe he didn't shut it all the way. He carefully got to his feet, knees trembling. The floor was cold through his socks as he took one step, then another toward the closet. The nightlight's glow faded the farther from his bed he went, until he was engulfed in shadow. He could barely see the outline of his own hand as he reached out for the closet door. He paused inches from the knob. His heart hammered, and he realized he was holding his breath. With a rush of determination, he exhaled and grabbed the thin wooden edge of the door, swinging it closed. It resisted for just a second, as if someone on the other side pressed back. Then it clicked shut. Michael stumbled backward, nearly tripping over his sleeping bag. He kept his eyes on the closet. The door remained closed now. He waited, body tense, expecting it to drift open again. It didn't. After almost a minute of standing there in the dark, he realized how silly he probably looked, ready to fight a closet door. He swallowed, his throat dry, and crept back to his sleeping bag. He slid inside, not taking his eyes off the closet until he was lying down. The closet stayed shut. It was likely the draft from the window or a tilt in the floor that made it open. Old buildings did that. He repeated this reasoning to himself, trying to slow his racing heart. Outside his door, the soft sounds of his parents moving about had ceased. It sounded like they had gone to their own room down the hall. Michael pulled the sleeping bag up to his chin and forced his eyes closed. He was exhausted, but every nerve in his body was alert, listening for the slightest sound. After a long time, he eventually fell into a restless, dreamless sleep. Sunlight streamed through the curtains when Michael awoke. For a moment, he didn't remember where he was. The ceiling was unfamiliar, the pattern of light different from his old room. Then he heard his parents' voices in the kitchen, and the memory of the move came back. He sat up in his sleeping bag, rubbing his eyes. Last night's fears felt hazy in daylight. Did the closet door really open by itself, or had he imagined it while half asleep? The closet stood closed now, looking ordinary. Michael got up and pulled the doors open to reassure himself. The closet was empty and benign. The single wire hanger hung quietly from the rod. Sunlight didn't reach inside, leaving the top in shadow. Michael noticed a rough patch on the wooden rod, like something had worn it, probably just from years of use. He placed the hanger back on the rod and firmly shut the closet doors, hearing the faint click of the latch. In the kitchen, his mother slid a bowl of cereal over to him at the small table. The air smelled like coffee and cardboard. "Morning, honey. Sleep okay?" she asked softly. "Yeah, okay," he lied. He didn't mention waking up in terror. In the brightness of morning, it felt silly. It was a little cold on the floor. "We'll have your bed set up by tonight," Rachel assured, offering a tired smile. His father was already dressed, sipping coffee as he skimmed a newspaper. "That closet door still closed?" David asked lightly. "I'll take a look at it later. Might need a sturdier latch." Michael only nodded and focused on his cereal. The morning passed in a whirlwind when the moving truck arrived with their furniture. Soon Michael's room transformed with his familiar bed, desk and bookshelf. Having his own things around made the space feel safer. They placed his bed against the wall opposite the closet. When Michael sat on his mattress for the first time, he realized it faced directly toward the closet doors. He tried not to think about it. True to his word, David came in with a screwdriver to adjust the closet door latch. Michael watched as his father tightened some screws and tested the door repeatedly until it stayed shut. "There, that should hold it," David said. He gave Michael a grin. "No more midnight surprises? Okay." Michael mustered a smile. "Thanks, Dad." By late afternoon, they had unpacked enough to feel settled. To take a break, they all went for a short walk around the neighborhood. They found a small park with a couple of swings and a basketball court, and passed a bakery and a corner store. The crisp air and a bit of exploring lifted everyone's spirits for a while. As they returned to the building, they met an older woman in the lobby checking her mail. "You must be the new folks in 2B, she greeted. She introduced herself as Marjorie from 1A and welcomed them warmly. "It's a good building," she said, "creaky at night, but full of character." Michael wondered if she chose the word creaky on purpose. He thought of his closet door and felt a slight chill. But Marjorie's smile was friendly, nothing sinister, and soon they were heading upstairs. Evening came, and with it a simple dinner of takeout eaten amid half-unpacked boxes. Michael felt a heavy fatigue from the day's labor, but also an anxiety that grew as night approached. He helped wash up their plastic plates, stalling his inevitable return to the bedroom. When it was time for bed, his mother found him lingering in the living room and gently steered him toward his room. With the furniture in place, his room looked much more like it should. His posters were rolled up in a tube still, but the familiar pattern of his bedspread and the books on his shelf were comforting. "Doing okay?" Rachel asked as Michael got into bed. "Yeah," he said, pulling the blankets up to his chin. In truth, his stomach was knotted with dread of another nightmare. David popped his head in. "Lights out, champ." He gave an encouraging nod. "How about we leave your door cracked again tonight?" Michael exhaled in relief. "Yes, please." His parents said goodnight, and his dad left the hallway light on a dimmer. "We're right here if you need us," his mom reminded him softly. Then the door was left open a few inches, and they were gone. Michael lay in bed, eyes drawn to the closet. The white doors stood closed. The new latch seemed to hold them snug. He tried to let that fact reassure him as he drifted towards sleep. Sometime deep in the night, Michael stirred. A faint sound had woken him, a soft rustling like fabric sliding over wood. Disoriented, he blinked in the darkness. The house was silent. He could hear only his own breathing and the distant hum of the refrigerator. He became aware that the closet door was no longer closed. The left door was open. Not just a crack, halfway. His heart lurched. In the darkness, something hung within the closet. A pale, human-shaped silhouette suspended from the rod. Michael's mouth went dry. He stared, unblinking, thinking it had to be a trick of the dark. But as his eyes adjusted, details emerged. Long hair dangling limp. The outline of shoulders and dangling feet. The figure of a woman swaying almost imperceptibly, as if stirred by a breeze that wasn't there. A strangled whine escaped Michael's throat. He wanted to scream, to move, but terror pinned him. The figure's head lolled forward, and for one terrifying moment he thought he saw the glint of eyes opening in the dark, fixed on him. That broke his paralysis. Michael screamed. "Mom! Dad!" His voice was shrill with panic. Instantly he heard the thud of footsteps in the hall. The light outside his room flared brighter as his dad hit the switch and burst through the door with Rachel right behind. Michael was shaking so hard the bed frame trembled. He pointed a trembling finger at the closet, unable to form words, just sobbing. David, breathing hard, charged to the closet and yanked the door fully open. Light from the hall and the lamp Rachel clicked on flooded the space. It was empty. Nothing but the lone wire hanger hanging innocently. "There's nothing here, Michael," his father said, voice firm but tinged with concern. He even swept aside the hanging coats, though there were none yet, to show every corner. "See?" Michael could only stare. The woman was gone, as if she had never been. If she was ever there at all. Rachel sat beside him on the bed and pulled him into her arms. He was clammy with sweat and cold as ice. It's okay," she murmured, rocking him slightly. "You had a bad dream." "I wasn't asleep," he managed to choke out. "I saw a lady." His father knelt next to him, putting a hand on his back. "Hey, champ, sometimes dreams feel real. You might have been half awake." Michael's eyes were huge and fixed on the closet. He had been awake. He was sure of it. But now doubt crept in. He hadn't turned on the light to check before screaming. Could it have been an illusion? His mind playing a trick with shadows? I thought someone was there," he whispered, tears streaming down his face in shame and fear. Rachel kissed the top of his head. "You're safe, I promise. Nothing's there now." David gently closed the closet doors again and then said, "Why don't we all go to the living room for the rest of the night? We could camp out on the couch, maybe watch something funny on TV until we relax." Michael hiccuped a sob, mortified that he was causing so much trouble. "I'm sorry," he managed to say. His mom hushed him. "There's nothing to be sorry for. We all get scared, honey." They gathered pillows and blankets and made a makeshift bed on the pull-out sofa in the living room. Michael nestled between his parents, still trembling slightly. His father turned on a lamp and an old sitcom at low volume. The familiar canned laughter and the warmth of his parents finally began to soothe him. Lying there sandwiched between Mom and Dad, Michael felt exhaustion drag him down. His mother held his hand until his eyes fell shut. The last thing he thought before sleep claimed him was the image of that hanging woman, and a question that gnawed at him. Was it just a nightmare, or was something truly wrong with his new home? He did not see the wire hanger on his closet floor, knocked off the rod in the commotion, now lying in a twisted heap. Michael woke on the pull-out couch with a stiff neck and gritty eyes. Early light filtered through the blinds. His father was already up, quietly sipping coffee at the kitchen counter. Rachel still dozed beside Michael, one arm protectively over him. He slipped out of bed and joined his dad. David looked as exhausted as Michael felt. "Morning, champ," he said softly. "You okay? You okay?" Michael shrugged, tired. They spoke in hushed tones so as not to wake Rachel. "What you saw last night," his father began gently. "You know it wasn't real, right? Sometimes our minds—" "I know," Michael interrupted, though in truth he wasn't convinced. He mustered the courage to ask, "Dad, do you know if anything bad ever happened in our apartment? Before us?" David raised his eyebrows. "Bad? Like what?" Michael looked down at his feet. I don't know, just anything weird. His father sighed. Not that I know of. The last tenants moved out to be closer to work. That's all I heard. Why? Michael opened his mouth, then closed it. He couldn't explain without sounding crazy. No reason. Just curious. His father put an arm around his shoulders. I promise, this is a safe place. Sometimes a new house can make you imagine things. It happened to me when I was a kid too. He offered a small smile. Michael tried to smile back. A rustle from the living room announced his mother waking. Soon, Rachel joined them, giving Michael a worried once-over. "We'll take it easy today, okay?" she said, gently stroking his hair. He nodded. The day passed quietly. Michael helped unpack a little, but mostly he hovered near his parents, not wanting to be alone. Every time he went to his room, his eyes were drawn to the closet. At one point he noticed the wire hanger had fallen onto the floor of the closet, partially wedged under a box. He picked it up. The thin metal had warped into a vaguely looped shape. It made him think of a noose, and he shivered, quickly hanging it back up and closing the closet doors hard. Around midday, he overheard his parents talking in low voices in the kitchen. Though he couldn't catch every word, he heard his name and phrases like, "if it keeps happening," and "maybe talk to someone." His mother sounded hesitant, his father concerned. Michael's cheeks burned with shame. They thought he might need a doctor or therapist. They probably thought he was losing his mind. He crept away, pretending he hadn't heard. As evening arrived, Michael's anxiety grew. He didn't want a repeat of the night before. Honestly, he never wanted to see that horrible spectre again. When Rachel gently suggested she could sleep in his room with him that night, he agreed with relief. They set up an air mattress on the floor beside his bed. "I'll be right here," his mom assured, patting the puffy mattress. Michael changed into pajamas and crawled under his covers. He noticed his mom left the closet light on and the door slightly open. It sent a thin beam of light across the room. He tensed at first, but she explained softly, "This way you can see there's nothing to fear." He wasn't sure if it made him feel better or not, but with her in the room, he did feel safer. He fell asleep more easily than he expected, the soft glow from the closet and the sound of his mother's steady breathing lulling him. For the first time in 2 nights, Michael slept through until morning. He woke in a tangle of blankets as pale dawn light filled his window. On the air mattress, Rachel was just stirring. When she met Michael's eyes, they both smiled. They had made it through the night undisturbed. Over breakfast, there was a sense of cautious relief. David ruffled Michael's hair, saying, "See, each night will get easier." Michael hoped he was right. That day was Monday, and Michael's first day at his new school. Despite his lingering worries, the normalcy of going to school was almost welcome. He felt nervous for different reasons as his mother walked him to the nearby middle school, but it distracted him from thoughts of the closet. Classes and unfamiliar faces blurred by in a haze. He was tired from the cumulative stress, but he managed to get through the day without incident. By the final bell, he had a dull headache and a yearning to just be back home. Rachel met him outside and peppered him with gentle questions on the walk home. He answered as best he could. The teachers were nice. He hadn't really made friends yet. She assured him that would come with time. When they got home to the apartment, a late afternoon gloom had settled in the sky, promising rain. Michael's stomach tightened as he realized night would come again, and with it the potential for another visit from the hanging woman. Last night's success with his mom there felt fragile. At dinner, his parents gently probed how he was feeling. He could tell they were hoping the worst was over. He wanted to believe it too. "I think I'm okay," he said, though his eyes kept flicking toward the hallway and his room beyond. Sensing his apprehension, Rachel offered, "I can stay in your room again tonight if you want." Michael bit his lip. He hated to put her out another night. She had complained jokingly that morning about her stiff back on the air mattress. And his dad had an important week at work. They both needed good rest. "Maybe I should try it alone," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. His mother looked at him searchingly. "Only if you feel ready." Michael wasn't sure he'd ever feel ready, but he also felt guilty. What if you sit with me until I fall asleep, and then go to your room," he suggested, "just for a little while." Rachel smiled softly. "Of course, we can do that." That night, Michael went through his bedtime routine with leaden legs, heart thumping. He climbed into his own bed, dressed in his warmest pyjamas, and his mom perched beside him. She left the closet light on again and door ajar, the way they had the night before. She also left the hallway light on outside. The room was gently illuminated from two sides, chasing away any total darkness. They chatted quietly for a while, about nothing important, a new book his mom wanted to read, a funny story about how Dad nearly got lost driving to work in the new city. It relaxed Michael. He found himself yawning. When he was on the verge of sleep, his mom gently brushed his hair back. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered. "Night, Mom," he murmured, barely awake. As he sank into dreams, he heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. He drifted off, thinking maybe, just maybe, things would be okay. A low rumble of thunder rolled in the distance. Past midnight, Michael drifted from deep sleep into a familiar dread. He wasn't sure what woke him, but his skin prickled with the sense of being watched. He blinked groggily. The soft lights from the closet and hallway still shone, but the air felt colder. Rain tapped at the window. He turned his head toward the closet and felt his blood turn to ice. The closet door was open wider than before. They had left it slightly ajar with the light on, but now it yawned wide, 2 feet or more. The bulb inside cast a weak, flickering glow, and beneath that light something hung. The woman was back. She dangled from the wooden rod, rope digging into her neck, head lolled at an angle. Her hair hung forward, obscuring her face, until it shifted. She raised her head slowly, and Michael saw her eyes, wide open and gleaming in the dim light. They were fixed directly on him. Michael's breath seized. A faint wheezing sound carried across the room, like air squeezed through a throat. The hanging figure's chest moved, a shallow, unnatural breath. The sickly sweet smell of rotten old flowers wafted out, stronger than before. He wanted to scream, but terror had cinched around his voice. "Move!" His mind shouted, but his body felt glued to the bed. Lightning flashed, stark white light filling the room for an instant. In that flash, the woman's face lit up. Skin waxy and taut, eyes clouded with death yet staring, mouth open as if gasping or ready to whisper. Michael saw her arm twitch, a finger crooking. A strangled cry broke from him. At last, he tore his gaze away and threw himself out of bed. He had to get out now. Barely thinking, he lunged for the bedroom door. His peripheral vision caught a sudden swing of movement from the closet, but he didn't dare look. Adrenaline propelled him down the hallway. He passed his parents' bedroom door. He yearned to pound on it, to dive between them and hide. But shame and desperation pushed him further. He couldn't face them with this again. He just needed to escape. Heart in his throat, Michael fumbled at the apartment's front door lock. His hands were slippery with sweat and trembling so hard the bolt felt jammed. Another roll of thunder rattled the building as he finally got it open and burst out onto the landing. He dashed down the stairs, heedless of the darkness. On the last few steps he stumbled and fell hard, pain jolting up his tailbone. He bit back a yelp, scrambled up and kept running. In seconds he was out on the front stoop, rain pelting his face and soaking through his thin pyjamas. The cold downpour was a shock, snapping him into a kind of clarity. He stopped under the meagre shelter of the awning, chest heaving. Water ran in rivulets down his hair and face. Only then did he dare to look back through the glass door. The hallway beyond was empty. No figure pursued him. Inside the apartment, maybe that thing still hung silently, but at least it wasn't here. Michael sank down on the concrete step, wrapping his arms around himself. He was shaking uncontrollably, from cold, from terror, from exhaustion. The rain plastered his clothes to his skin, but he barely felt it. He stared out at the deserted, wet street and finally let out a wail of anguish he'd been holding in. The sound was lost in the storm. He didn't know how long he sat there, hunched and sobbing. It could have been seconds or minutes. Suddenly, the building's front door banged open behind him. "Michael!" his father's voice yelled, raw with panic. Michael jerked around to see his dad rushing out, barefoot and frantic, eyes scanning the darkness until they landed on the small, soaked shape of his son. In an instant, David was at Michael's side, dropping to his knees on the wet ground. "Oh, God, Michael," he breathed, wrapping his arms around him. Michael collapsed into his father, crying hard. His mother was seconds behind, a coat thrown over her nightgown. She pulled it off and cocooned it around Michael's trembling shoulders, then folded herself around both of them. "Honey, you're freezing," she exclaimed, voice tight with fear and relief. She rubbed his arms vigorously through the coat. Michael could only sob, I'm sorry, over and over. His parents shushed him with gentle words. "You're safe," his mom whispered, kissing his drenched hair. "We've got you." Lightning lit up the street again, and David flinched, realizing all of them were exposed to the storm. "Let's get inside," he urged. He stood, scooping Michael up into his arms despite the boy being nearly too big to carry. Michael clung to him, hiding his face against his dad's shoulder. Back in the lobby, they hurried upstairs. A neighbour's door cracked open. Marjorie's concerned face peered out. Rachel managed a quick, strained explanation. Just a bad nightmare. Marjorie nodded sympathetically as they disappeared into 2B. Inside, David set Michael down on the couch. Rachel flew to fetch towels. Michael sat, teeth chattering, water puddling at his feet. The apartment felt warm, almost hot compared to outside, but he couldn't stop shivering. His dad knelt, wrapping a towel around Michael's shoulders and using another to squeeze the rain from his hair. "Are you hurt?" he asked, noticing Michael wince as he shifted. "I fell on the stairs," Michael whispered. David's face tightened with worry as he quickly checked for injury. Satisfied it was minor, he pulled a fleece blanket around Michael snugly. "It's okay now, you're okay." Rachel returned and gently dabbed his face dry, then cupped his cheeks. "Why did you run, sweetie?" she asked, voice pained. Michael's eyes brimmed. "I saw her again," he croaked. "She was there in my closet. I couldn't stay." He expected his father to look frustrated or doubtful. Instead, David closed his eyes briefly, a muscle in his jaw twitching. When he opened them, he nodded. "All right." He wrapped an arm around Michael. "No more. We're not letting this continue." Rachel nodded firmly. "Tomorrow, first thing, we'll call Dr. Emmons and find a therapist or someone who can help." Michael gave a small, shaky nod of agreement. He felt wrung out and desperate enough to accept any help. "I'm sorry," he said again softly. "There's nothing to be sorry for," his father said. Michael could hear a subtle fierceness in his voice. Anger, but not at him. "You didn't do anything wrong. We're going to fix this." David stood abruptly. He glanced toward the hallway with a hard expression. "That closet," he muttered. Before Michael or Rachel could ask, he strode away down the hall. A moment later, Michael flinched at the crash of his closet doors being flung open and the metallic screech of a tool prying at hinges. Rachel put a hand on Michael's knee. "Let's get you into dry clothes, honey." She led him to the bathroom, handing him a fresh pair of pajamas and helping him peel off the soaked ones. The mirror reflected a pale, red-eyed boy. He scarcely recognized himself. By the time they emerged, David had done something Michael didn't expect. He had removed the folding closet doors completely. They were off their hinges, now propped against the wall. The closet's interior light fixture was dangling by a wire. David had unscrewed the bulb. Michael stared at the transformation. The closet was now just an open recess, empty, exposed. The wire hanger lay on the floor among bits of hardware. His father turned, breathing heavily from exertion. "It won't bother you again," he said, as if he'd fought off a monster. "No door to creak open, no shadows inside. It's just a nook, see? Nothing can hide in there." Tears stung Michael's eyes. His dad couldn't banish the image from his mind, but he was trying everything to make that room feel safe. It was both reassuring and heartbreaking. Michael stepped forward and hugged his father tightly. David hugged back, stroking the back of his head. "We'll get through this, buddy," he whispered. Rachel joined them, wrapping them both in her arms. They stood in the middle of the dismantled bedroom in a huddle of damp clothes, warmth, and shared fear. After a long moment, David kissed the top of Michael's head. "Let's get some rest, all of us. Not in here. Maybe in the living room where it's cozy." None of them wanted to linger near that closet space tonight. They retreated to the living room and set up the pull-out couch once more. Rachel made hot cocoa to help warm Michael up, and David found a light-hearted movie on TV, though none of them paid much attention to it. Michael nestled between his parents under a pile of blankets. His body ached and his nerves were shot, but for the first time he truly felt he wasn't facing this alone. His mom kept a comforting arm around him, and his dad kept hold of his hand until the warmth and safety slowly coaxed Michael's eyes closed. He slept dreamlessly, the storm outside finally passing into a calm, quiet night. The next morning dawned clear and pale. Michael woke on the living room pull-out couch, tucked safely between his parents. For a moment he just lay there, listening to their soft breathing and relishing the feeling of safety. He carefully slipped out from under the blanket. His movement roused his father, who blinked awake. "Hey, champ," David murmured, voice rough with sleep. "You okay?" Michael nodded. "Yeah, better." Rachel stirred as well. They pulled Michael into a morning hug that said everything: relief, love, reassurance. Despite the turmoil of the night before, Michael managed a small smile. Daylight made the horrors of the night feel a bit more distant. True to their word, his parents immediately set about helping him. His mom called his pediatrician as soon as the office opened, getting a referral to a child therapist who could see Michael later that week. His dad double-checked the apartment's smoke and carbon monoxide detectors and made plans to test for any gas or mold issues, just to rule out physical causes for Michael's visions. While his mother was on the phone, Michael crept to the doorway of his bedroom. Sunlight poured in, illuminating the changes his dad had made. The closet stood open and empty of mystery, its doors gone. His clothes hung neatly in plain view. The space looked smaller and completely harmless. Michael exhaled, tension leaving his shoulders. It wasn't over. Memories and fears don't vanish with the sun, but it felt more manageable now. That afternoon, there was a knock at the door. It was Marjorie from 1A with a tin of cookies. She came bearing a warm smile and perhaps a bit of curiosity about the previous night's drama. Over tea in the kitchen, Marjorie said gently, "Is everything all right now? I heard some noise last night." Rachel gave a cautious nod. "We had a bit of a scare, but we're sorting it out. Moving has been stressful for Michael." Michael sat quietly next to his mom, hands around a mug of cocoa. He had a feeling Marjorie knew more than she let on. Sure enough, the kindly old neighbour hesitated, then said, "I wasn't going to mention this, but since he's had a scare, you should know. A few years back, a young woman who lived in your apartment, she passed away in the bedroom closet." Michael felt goosebumps break out over his arms. Rachel's face paled. "Passed away in the closet?" she echoed. Marjorie lowered her voice. "She took her own life, dear. Her name was Lydia. It was very tragic. She'd been lonely and depressed. I just thought, if Michael sensed something, sometimes these old places carry a feeling." She reached over to squeeze Michael's hand lightly. "It's nothing supernatural, sweetheart, but sometimes knowing the history can unsettle anyone, let alone a sensitive boy." Rachel swallowed, absorbing this. "Thank you for telling us," she said softly. "I'm so sorry that happened." After Marjorie left, Michael and his parents sat together digesting the news. Michael's heart was pounding. "So, I wasn't completely crazy," he muttered. "A woman really died there." "No, you're not crazy at all," David said firmly, putting an arm around him. "But remember, what you saw was still your mind's way of reacting. It doesn't mean it was actually her ghost." Rachel nodded. "Your imagination latched onto something very real and scary, but it made it visible in a way only you could see. Our minds can play tricks, especially when we're anxious." Michael tried to process it. It was eerie that he had envisioned details he couldn't have known. But he had noticed things, the smell of flowers, the hangar, and maybe unconsciously he put those clues together. However it happened, at least it meant there was a reason behind this nightmare. It wasn't random. "What happened to Lydia wasn't your fault," his mother added gently, "and she can't hurt you. If anything, maybe you were picking up on a memory of sadness. But it's just a memory, not a person." Michael took a deep breath. "It still feels real to me at night," he admitted, "but knowing this helps, I think." His father squeezed his shoulder. "You're an empathetic kid. You care. That's nothing to be ashamed of. We just have to help your brain understand what's real and what's not." He managed a small grin. "That therapist is going to be so impressed with our detective work when we tell her we already solved half the mystery." Michael gave a tiny smile at that. That night, Michael decided to face his room again. He wasn't going to be forced. His parents made it clear he could sleep wherever he felt safest, but he chose to try. With the closet now openly visible and a new nightlight casting a warm glow in the corner, the room felt markedly different. Even so, when it was bedtime, Michael's heart beat fast as he climbed into his bed. His mom sat beside him, rubbing his back lightly. His dad hovered in the doorway, offering steady support. They stayed with him, chatting softly until Michael felt reasonably calm. He kept glancing at the exposed closet. Nothing there but hanging shirts and a stack of board games on the shelf. No shadows deep enough to hide anything. As his eyelids grew heavy, Michael whispered, "Good night, Mom." "Good night, Dad." Rachel brushed his forehead with a kiss. "Good night, my love. We're right in the next room." David gave a thumbs up from the door. "Sleep tight, buddy. We'll leave the door open a crack, okay?" "Okay," Michael replied. Just as his parents started to ease away, Michael added, "Good night, Lydia," under his breath, eyes on the closet. His mother paused, looking at him curiously. Michael felt a little embarrassed, but explained softly, I hope she rests in peace." Saying it out loud felt like acknowledging the real person beyond the terror. In a strange way, it eased him. Rachel's eyes shone as she nodded. "I'm sure she's at peace," she whispered. They left his door ajar and the hallway light on low. Before long, the household was quiet. Michael lay awake for a few minutes, listening to the faint murmur of the TV down the hall where his parents unwound, unwilling to go to sleep until they were sure he was all right. He gazed at the closet. It looked almost cozy with the amber nightlight shining across it. He could see the mottled pattern of his wallpaper inside, the outline of the shelf. Ordinary. Safe. Fear still lurked at the edges of his mind, but it wasn't as sharp as before. If he felt a tremor of panic, he remembered to breathe like his mom had coached him and focus on what was real. The soft blankets in his hands, the faint scent of laundry detergent on his pillow, the distant sound of a car horn outside. The real world, solid and here. In that real world, he had his mom and dad. He had friendly neighbours like Marjorie. He would meet with someone who could help him talk through his fears soon. He wasn't alone. For the first time since moving into this apartment, Michael believed that this could truly become home. Perhaps it would always carry a scar of what happened, both long ago and in these first hard days. But scars healed. They became part of you, making you stronger. His eyes drifted shut. In the darkness behind his eyelids, he thought he saw a gentle face, sad but smiling. Then it was gone. Just imagination, he told himself. Just imagination. Michael rolled over, hugging a worn old teddy bear to his chest, and let out a long breath. "We'll be okay," he mumbled, and in the quiet room nothing stirred except the soft exhale of his own breath, steady and sure, as he finally peacefully fell asleep. Michael's first nights in the apartment were haunted by more than just shadows. He faced the lingering sorrow of a life lost too soon. But through fear, family, and the power of truth, he reclaimed his room and his peace. What once hid in the dark now rests quietly in memory, no longer a threat, but a reminder. Not all ghosts are seen, some are felt, waiting for someone brave enough to understand them.
Every story has an end, but here, the mysteries never stop. Thank you for watching and being a part of this journey into the unknown. Your support keeps these stories alive, and there's plenty more waiting for you. We drop 3 new stories every week, so if you crave suspense, the unexplained, and the downright chilling, make sure you're subscribed and ready for what's next. Until then, keep your lights on, your doors locked, and remember, some stories stay with you long after they're told.